1959, Nuevo León, northern Mexico. In the infirmary block of Topo Chico prison, a young surgeon named Dr. Alfredo Bali Trevino prepared a syringe under a dying light. Guards said he looked calm, too calm. What began as a lover's quarrel ended in one of the most gruesome crimes the region had ever recorded. The autopsy notes confirmed careful surgical incisions, not rage, but precision. For years, the locals whispered that the doctor still practiced medicine for inmates, even after his conviction. To some, he was charitable, to others, monstrous. When author Thomas Harris visited Mexico in the 1960s as a journalist, he met a polite, soft-spoken prisoner said to have helped people die properly. Everyone assumed it was myth, just an anecdote about a doctor behind bars. But the case file still exists, blood-stamped, yellowed. Decades later, Hollywood would soften his edges, turning the legend into charm. Before the crime, Dr. Alfredo Bali Trevino was a respected young physician in Monterrey, born in 1931 into a stable middle-class family. Records from the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León show high marks in surgery. His colleagues described him as gentle, methodical, one of those who never raised his voice. Police archives later noted that he operated a small private clinic while providing free treatments to poor families. His generosity, though real, came with a possessive intensity toward those he helped. One recurring name appears in his clinic accounts: Jesus Castillo Rangel, a minor acquaintance turned lover. Their relationship, concealed from public view in conservative 1950s Mexico, became what one journalist later called a secret lived like an infection. When Rangel disappeared in late October 1959, the missing person form filled by his family was the first official footprint of what would become the Lecter connection. The case report in El Porvenir, Monterrey, November 1959, specified the scene. A small, disinfected room in Dr. Bali's home clinic, iron table, sterile odor. Police found traces of blood scrubbed incompletely from the floor seams. Witnesses from the neighborhood, notably cleaning staff and one pharmacy messenger named Ernesto Ruiz, reported seeing a car leave the doctor's home around midnight. Inside, they saw something covered in a white sheet. When authorities discovered Rangel's remains days later on the outskirts of the city, the cuts were careful, even reverent. A medical examiner's note preserved in the Monterrey Judicial Archive reads, "Incisions performed with surgical skill. Intent appears clinical rather than homicidal rage. People didn't know what to call it. Love crime, medical madness, sacrilege." The doctor surrendered calmly. "I wanted him to feel no pain," he said. For investigators, that phrase marked the first time compassion met murder in official testimony. The trial of Alfredo Bali Trevino opened in 1961. Reporters described his skull-like face, his politeness. He smiled at the judge as if recommending a cure. He was convicted of murder and sent to Topo Chico prison, one of northern Mexico's toughest facilities. By 1963, prison reports listed him not as a typical inmate, but as resident medic. Guards allowed him to treat other prisoners, suturing knife wounds and fevers. Locals began calling him El Doctor de los Muertos. Archive photos from the period show makeshift operating cots under naked bulbs. Some wardens later admitted that, paradoxically, he saved lives within those walls. When a visiting American journalist, Thomas Harris, researching a border narcotics story, met him, he reportedly introduced himself with warmth and precision. "You must be careful with monsters," Bali said. "They can look very polite." Harris never forgot him. According to Harris's own later remarks, interviews, 1999 Penguin edition notes, he visited Dr. Bali while seeking information on a wounded inmate. Harris expected brutality. Instead, he found courtesy. "He was small, almost delicate," Harris told The Times. "He asked about my family before answering any question. The doctor spoke of dignity, order, and the responsibility of giving death meaning." That phrase, later echoed in Lecter's lines, first appeared in La Prensa's summary of the interview notes kept by prison staff. No guards reported threats from him. Yet, some inmates refused treatment, claiming fear. "He'd look at your pulse and smile," recalled an ex-prisoner, Antonio Vargas. "I think he measured more than your heart." Among Harris's notebooks preserved in the University of Texas archive, one margin note reads faintly, "Doctor as predator, charm as scalpel." The boundary between observation and infection had begun. Topo Chico's chapel logs between 1964-66 list the doctor attending every Sunday Mass. Father Jose Encina, then prison chaplain, wrote in a 1977 memoir. He confessed calmly, as though reviewing a patient case. His sin, he said, was not killing, but administering beyond permission. Other prisoners swore strange things happened near the clinic. Tools vanishing, soft humming under the hum of fluorescent lights. A Catholic volunteer nurse testified years later that she woke one night to the smell of ether. Though no surgery was scheduled, every record remains procedural, yet tone bleeds through the language. Disquiet, unease, moral incision. The guards posted near his cell developed small rituals. One crossed himself before entering. Another refused to make eye contact. They said the doctor saw too deeply. It wasn't supernatural. It was surgical empathy turned rancid, the kind that looks through, not at. Harris came back once more in 1965, ostensibly for follow-up research. This visit appears nowhere in official immigration records, but was confirmed by 2 letters archived at Rice University. One from Harris to his editor referencing that brilliant inmate doctor in Monterey, and another from a shady Mexican contact advising discretion. By then, Bali was petitioning for sentence reduction. Inside the letter to the Minister of Justice, discovered later in 1993 through a declassified file, he wrote, "I have mended more wounds than I ever caused. Does that balance the scales?" Harris reportedly watched him treat a wound that day. A quiet ritual, needle and thread glinting under sweat-slick light. When Harris later wrote Red Dragon, 1981, and The Silence of the Lambs, 1988, some phrases, a tenant of grace, savor the organs of civility, mirrored notes from those Mexican transcripts. Local journalists took decades to connect them. In Monterey, the case faded. Official censorship minimized mention of homosexual motives, considered social scandal. El Norte ran occasional retrospectives, cautious, academic in tone. But oral history persisted. An old pharmacist remembered delivering anesthetics the week before the murder. He asked for more chloroform than usual, said he was planning a long surgery. Women from the neighborhood told later documentarians that cats gathered near his clinic, even after years abandoned. It smelled like chemicals, one said, but also something sweet. By the 1970s, urban legends called the house cursed. When a local hospital took over the property, a nurse claimed instruments disappeared from locked cabinets. Maintenance logs marked equipment loss, though no theft was registered. Small thing, but every story registered in ink becomes weight. The past quietly refused burial. In 2002, a brief article in El Diario de Monterrey recorded the parole of Dr. Alfredo Bali Trevino. He re-entered civilian life at 71. Reporters interviewed him outside a small clinic he reopened, again tending to the poor. He admitted his crime only in euphemisms. "I made a mistake of passion," he said softly. Locals noted his calmness. Even his patients, often unaware of his history, described him as terribly kind. The Mexico Medical Association reinstated a limited license. A surviving court file indicates he remained under psychological observation for 3 years. Then came Hollywood's rekindled interest. Around that time, Hannibal, Ridley Scott, 2001, premiered, and journalists rediscovered the Mexican origin theory. Bali refused interviews but sent one short letter to a reporter. "Art redeems what it cannot forgive." He died in 2009, buried quietly in Monterrey's civil cemetery. No headstone inscription, only initials. When The Silence of the Lambs won 5 Academy Awards in 1992, few viewers connected Dr. Bali to Hannibal Lecter. Harris had never named his inspiration publicly until much later. In a 2013 Times retrospective, Harris finally confirmed meeting a small, courteous Mexican doctor convicted of a crime of passion, describing him as the physical model and psychological embryo for Lecter. He said the real man was not a monster. He was deeply misunderstood. But archive researchers, comparing Harris's original notes, University of Texas collection, noticed nearly verbatim passages later fictionalized. The paradox lay in tone. The author transformed a real tragedy into intellectual horror, extracting intellect from real death. Behind the glass case of cinema, Dr. Bali became immortal, without consent. This would renew debate in Mexican media. Can an elegant monster cleanse a messy crime? To retrace the real face behind the fiction, documentarians in the 2000s revisited Topo Chico. By then, the prison itself had become its own ghost, cells stripped bare, graffiti older than some guards. In the administrative archive, they found a fragment labeled Medical Notes 1962. The handwriting matched Bali's. Among dosage records, one line stood apart: "Mercy demands dissection." That phrase, through adaptational irony, became the essence of cinematic Lecter, art through atrocity. Film scholars analyzed the shift. Hollywood exaggerated intellect, erased poverty, sanitized sexuality. The real story had been one of shame and repression. The movie transmuted it into aesthetic dread. Letters to film magazines in 1991 from Mexican viewers protested, "He was ours. They stole even his sin." But fascination prevailed. Horror had become heritage. After Harris's admission, regional museums in Monterrey briefly debated acquiring artifacts from the case. The Monterrey Historical Museum refused. Out of respect, a private collector preserved a medicine chest said to be Bali's. During 2017's exhibition, Monstruos y Mitos de México, a replica syringe labeled El Médico de los Muertos was mistakenly displayed. Visitors whispered prayers before it. Staff later removed it following complaints of fainting and panic, all logged in the museum's daily incident book. Cultural academics observed how a local tragedy migrated into myth. Belief crystallized not by faith, but by fame. Each retelling polished the edges, leaving only charm. As one curator noted, the scariest thing isn't what he did, but how politely he did it. Lecter became a mirror for civility's dark spine, the line between healer and destroyer blurred by human fascination itself. In 2019, Topo Chico prison officially closed due to overcrowding. Reporters entering the abandoned compound found medical charts scattered on the infirmary floor. Some bore the initials ABT. Guards still refused shift duty at night during the decommissioning. One said he heard steel moving by itself. Another refused to enter the former infirmary alone. The team from the Monterey Chronicle recorded the ambient noises, metallic scraping, dripping pipes, and what one technician thought was whispering caught on playback. Audio specialists later explained it as equipment friction. Yet even the rationalists labeled the file Disturbance Clip Bali Wav. At the university archives, students analyzing Harris's notebooks sometimes report headaches, a sense of being observed, maybe coincidence, maybe contagion of suggestion. Belief creates its own echo chamber. Objects remember their admirers. The question lingers: does fascination feed what faith once feared? The modern narrator, researcher, documentarian, investigator, stands in Monterey's quiet civil cemetery. Evening light, faint odor of disinfectant drifting from a nearby hospital. The headstone is unmarked, only initials. The camera hum picks up static. In the investigator's notebook, final remark, he signed his patient's charts more carefully than his confession. No candle, no offering, just silence. A clerk at the archives later reports that each time the folder is requested, case 1959 in 12M, the lights flicker for a second. Could be old wiring, could be something else remembering brief fame. The file remains accessible but rarely touched. Some stories refuse burial. And somewhere, on screen, in memory, the doctor still smiles politely.